Good night, this is Fumi Sleepy Time Stories. Tonight's bedtime story is about to begin.
Once upon a time, there was a king. Where his kingdom was and what his name was, I no longer remember. He had no sons, only a single daughter who was often ill, and no doctor could cure her. A prophet told the king that his daughter would recover only if she ate an apple. So the king made a proclamation. Whoever brought an apple that cured the princess would win her hand in marriage and inherit the throne. A farmer with 3 sons heard of this and told his eldest, "Go pick a basket of fine red apples from the orchard and bring them to the palace. If the princess is cured, you'll marry her and become king." The young man, whose name was Torley, set off at once. On the road, he met a little dwarf with a white beard who asked what he carried in the basket. "Frog legs," Torley replied rudely. "So let it be frog legs forever," said the dwarf. At the palace, Torley offered the basket to the king. But when it was opened, the apples had vanished, and only twitching frog legs remained. Enraged, the king had him thrown out. Torley returned home and told his father what had happened. The father then sent his second son, Samo, to try his luck. Samo met the same dwarf, who asked him what he carried. "Pig bristles," Samo replied. "Then let it be pig bristles forever." The dwarf said. Samo reached the palace gates and insisted he had real apples. The guards, though suspicious, finally let him in. But when he uncovered the basket before the king, it was filled with nothing but pig bristles. The king was furious and had Samo whipped and thrown out. When he got home and told what happened, the youngest son, who everyone called Foolish Hans, asked if he might try. "You?" The father scoffed. "Your clever brothers failed, what can you do?" But Hans persisted, and eventually the father gave in, annoyed. "Go if you must. You'll come back empty-handed anyway." Hans was overjoyed. Night fell, and Hans, knowing he wouldn't reach the palace in time, decided to rest. He dreamt of the beautiful princess, grand palaces, gold, silver, and jewels. At dawn, he set out and soon met the same gray-coated dwarf. "What do you carry?" "In your basket?" the dwarf asked. "Apples," Hans said honestly, "to cure the princess." "Then so it shall be forever," said the dwarf. At the palace, the guards refused to let Hans in, having already been tricked twice. But Hans insisted his apples were the finest in the land. His sincerity convinced them, and they brought him to the king. When Hans opened his basket, it was filled with golden apples. The king, overjoyed, sent them to the princess, and guess who came to deliver the news? The princess herself. She had eaten the apples, leapt out of bed completely healed, and came running. Still, the king would not give her hand just yet. Hans must first build a ship that could sail better on land than on water. Hans agreed and went home. His father sent Torley to the forest to build the ship. While working, the dwarf came and asked what he was making. "A wooden spoon," Torley said. "Then let it be so forever," replied the dwarf. By evening, Torley's ship had turned into a spoon. The next day, Samo tried, but the same thing happened. On the 3rd day, Hans went. He worked hard, singing and chopping cheerfully. At noon, the dwarf appeared again. "What are you making?" he asked. "A ship that sails better on land than water," Hans replied truthfully. "Then let it be so forever," said the dwarf. By sunset, Hans had built the perfect land sailing ship. He sailed it to the palace like the wind, but the king still wasn't satisfied. Now Hans must tend 100 rabbits in a day without losing even one. Hans agreed and took the rabbits to a field. A few hours in, a maid came asking for one to serve to guests. Hans refused and said the king could host with peppered rabbit tomorrow. She cried, but Hans told her he'd give one only if the princess asked in person. She reported this, and the princess came. But before that, the dwarf had returned, and learning about the rabbits, gave Hans a magical flute. "If any rabbit runs off," he said, "just play this, and it will return." Hans gave a rabbit to the princess, who placed it in her apron. But after she walked about 100 steps, Hans played the flute, and the rabbit leapt from her apron and sped back. That evening he played the flute again, counted all the rabbits, and brought them safely back. The king was amazed, but still refused to give Hans his daughter. Now the king demanded that Hans steal a feather from the tail of the fearsome bird Grelver. Hans set out immediately. At night, he stayed at a manor where the host asked him to ask Grelver about a lost key to his treasure chest. Hans agreed. The next night, he stayed at a castle where the lord begged him to ask how to cure his daughter. Hans agreed again. At a river with no bridge, a tall man carried people across and asked Hans to find out why he had to carry everyone. Hans promised he would. He reached Grelver's house, where only its wife was home. She warned him the bird would eat anyone who spoke to it, so Hans hid under the bed. At midnight, when Grelver returned, it sniffed the air. "Wife, I smell a Christian. One was here," she said calmly. "He's gone now." Grelver was satisfied and soon fell asleep. While it snored, Hans plucked a feather from its tail. Grelver awoke in pain. "Someone pulled my tail." "You're dreaming," the wife soothed. Then she asked about the missing key. "Fools!" Grelver said. "It's behind the woodpile." In the shed, she asked about the sick girl. "Fools! A toad sleeps under the cellar stairs in a nest of her hair. Take it away, and she be well." Finally, the riverman. "Fool! He just needs to drop someone in the river, and he'll be free." The next morning, Grelver left, and Hans emerged with the feather. The wife reminded him of everything. Hans returned to the riverman first and told him the answer after being carried across. The man was thrilled and offered Hans a return trip, but Hans declined politely. Next, Hans cured the sick girl by retrieving the toad's nest. Her parents showered him with gold. At the manor, Hans found the key and was gifted more treasures. He returned to the king with gold, silver, cattle, sheep, and goats. The king asked where it all came from. "From Grelver," Hans replied. The greedy king ran off at once, but the tall man at the river threw him into the water and he drowned. And so Hans married the princess and became king.
The end.
you.